A clip has gone viral that shows that Britain has a huge problem. TikTok creator The Mike Guy interviewed two men who spoke about immigration, only to be interrupted by a woman who attacked immigrants.
What do you think about immigration?
Immigration, everybody's entitled to live where they want. Everybody's entitled to have a house. Everybody's entitled to eat food. I'm not racist, but as far as immigration, everybody's more than welcome to come and live wherever they want.
Yeah.
That's my.
Take all our fucking houses.
Yeah.
We'll say that into the mic. I'm disabled and I'm fucking homeless, mate. Yeah.
Oh,
All these foreign bastards keep coming over and taking our houses, so I will say it into the fucking mic. Yeah, I will.
Yeah. So basically, has your pip been cut?
I don't claim. I've no address to claim.
Has your pip been cut?
I don't get pip.
So has your housing benefit been cut?
I've not got a house. I've got any benefit with no house. I'm homeless. I sleep on the concrete.
No, you don't, love.
Do I not?
No, you can't do because you got a fucking wheelchair.
I can get on the floor, you fucking prick.
Oh, can you?
think-
Right, that's one for your pip assessment.
Don't
She can get
talk
on the
to me
floor.
like that.
Got one leg.
She can get on the floor. Hey, so that means you can get up out your wheelchair, you can get onto the floor, that means you can get into the job centre, you can go up for work and you can sign on.
to live, and I'll get a fucking house. I'll get a job. Yeah.
My love.
Give
My
me
love,
somewhere
just
to live,
wheel
and
on,
I'm willing
wheel
to
on,
work.
wheel
I'm
on,
willing to
wheel
work,
on.
mate.
So get up, get to the job centre and get yourself in work.
No, get a house first. How can I go to the job dirty as well?
Job centre like this.
Yeah.
Ask
No
a-
address.
Ask
to
a job
claim,
centre.
lover.
Ask a job centre for a
fixed
flexible
aboard,
support
no
grant.
No
fixed
fucking
aboard,
address.
no fixed
You
aboard.
cannot claim with no
Flexible
address.
support grant, yeah. We'll
My
get you
sweetheart.
your washing to get into work. They
that?
will pay £25 a week for your washing to get done so you can go to work.
I didn't know that.
Well, now you do.
Right.
Thank you so much, madam. I appreciate your time,
Yeah.
man. Thank you.
No need to be fucking on that. But I do get fucking.
I mean, I guess I like the handshake at the end, but I mean, you see that's a microcosm of the entire issue of Britain. The elites are laughing because this is exactly what they want. Blaming immigrants, the other blaming disabled people. No one blames the political and financial elite. No one blames the system. This is the epitome of crab mentality. Our country has this. We prefer to tear each other down in order to get ahead. I mean, when we realize we can't get ahead, we bring them down with us. I mean, if you haven't heard of crab mentality, you may have seen videos of sort of buckets with crabs in them. None of them can escape, not because they can't, but those who are nearing the edge of the bucket get pulled down by other crabs. If I can't escape, neither can you. This is our country's mentality to a T. But we really need to talk about this. We are being played. The billionaire class, the politicians, this is what they want. They want politics to be like this forever. Never-ending fighting amongst the 99% whilst the wealthiest get richer. It's immigrants' fault. Oh, it's being on pip. Wow, it's the 99% being destroyed by, what, the top 1%. Louisa, of course, the media and politicians have created this political climate, but on a deeper level, why do you think this is happening?
So obviously we know divide and conquer has always been the best tool of the ruling classes to enforce the status quo. And they use this because obviously the working class has its powers in numbers. The last thing you want the 99% to do is gain class consciousness, obviously, and unify against the 1%, the 1% will lose. So ideology is used to keep them in check, doesn't it? So obviously ideology is like the realm of ideas, or Gramsci calls it cultural hegemony. And the undercurrents of ideology, obviously capitalism, is called upon when capitalism is in need. So according to Marx, who I've seen has been in the background the whole time, the struggle under capitalism will lead to class consciousness and the overthrowing of the elites, right? And the birth of socialism, will happen. But the reverse is obviously is happening. We're going back to a feudal time, and we're seeing fascism. But capitalism is predicated and built on racism, fundamentally. So when capitalism is in crisis, the working classes are struggling. They will turn up the volume on racism to distract you from gaining class consciousness. And A few theorists have talked about this. Aimé Césaire, he's like a post-colonial theorist, and he talks about the fascist boomerang effect. So obviously, fascism exists within capitalism anyway. Like it exists in the way that we colonize other countries, and globalization. We export sort of labor and stuff like that. Fascism still exists, but it's unseen. When capitalism is in need and in crisis, then it will do a boomerang back to the colonizer's country and be used on the colonized like people themselves, so that the colonizer population, which I think is a really interesting concept here, definitely probably what we're seeing. But with neoliberalism in particular, the ideology not only exploits you, but it really humiliates you. Because it gives you only yourself to blame, which obviously scapegoats become extremely desirable in this political climate. Neoliberalism is this invisible hand, isn't it? It's made to feel like it's a natural. We talk about this like the markets are spooked, like the markets are some sort of like godly, spiritual thing that it's so natural, we can't understand it, and that inability to understand it is really the issue here, I think, and kind of exactly my project in trying to be able to get people to feel empowered in knowing what's going on, because when people give it a face, this invisible hand, when they give it a face or a race, that makes them feel more powerful, when they feel powerless. That's why aggrieved people will choose authoritarian leaders. They'll choose like the strong man because they feel weak. They want someone to blame. So it frees them from feeling the full brunt of the exploitation of neoliberalism or capitalism, because they can always take comfort as well in the fact that someone else has it worse, which is why racism, really thrives in this kind of environment. And it creates a false consciousness as well, that the harder you work, obviously, like the smarter you are or whatever, the more you will be rewarded. So any kind of win in this game, this extremely competitive environment, even if it means putting other groups down, like people of colour or women, you'll take that win. And there's nothing more powerful than aggrievement and wounded egos. And I think that's what we're seeing here with scapegoating, racism, transphobia, misogyny, white male victimhood, all those kind of things. I think that's exactly how I would put it as somebody who does theory. That's what I'm seeing at the minute.
I want to ask about Marx, actually. Was Marx wrong in terms of class consciousness?
Well, I'm going to say I said this on my TikTok, and oh my God, the Marxists came after me, so I'm going to be careful.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Marxist, by the way. We've got Marx above my shoulder here. He's going to be angry, but
yeah, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I love you, Marx. But I think the theory wasn't wrong. It was underdeveloped. I think Gramsci sort of answered the question, because what he relied on was class consciousness here, and class consciousness is not happening. That's kind of where we've run into issues with the Marxist, the German ideology. And he says that this revolution or whatever is predicated on material conditions, but the material conditions, if class struggle creates revolution, then aren't we struggling enough? Like, why hasn't the revolution happened? And I think that's the issue here, is the fact that we are this manufactured ignorance, about the economy, about the issues in society. This manufactured ignorance is keeping us from the revolution and from socialism. So, I think we need to maybe look to people like Gramsci, who talk about how we can capture this cultural hegemony, the ideas, because as much, I am a theorist, I do like ideas. I like the idea that ideas can change the debate. I mean, why else would we be doing this? Like, you have to create dialogue and conversation and stuff. And I think this is a situation we're in. We're in desperate need of changing the dialogue, changing the conversation, changing the ideas, and then we can use that to organize and change the material conditions.
I mean, as a Marxist myself, as someone who does see a lot of things through the material lens, kind of what happens when you're Marxist, I'm having to grapple with culture. And because we're seeing more radical elements of politics emerge, we're seeing the far right and radical right, which is everything about them is cultural, right? I'm starting to believe that, change isn't done by understanding people's material conditions. Of course, we need class consciousness, and where I agree with you, where Marx is undeveloped, not wrong, but underdeveloped, which is that class consciousness hasn't come about because of our material conditions. A lot of change happens, even when it's material change, happens through culture. When we look at unions, for example, I mean, I think the reason why we had strong unions and this idea of standing up for yourself was embedded through culture. The culture of not being bullies, the culture of actually we're going to stand together. Yeah. We're not going to be trampled on by bosses. And the way Thatcher changed that culture of individualism means that even though our material conditions comparatively is worse than maybe when it was in the 70s, actually it is worse when it comes to wages, the same response of collectivism and unionization hasn't come together because Thatcher changed the culture of individualism. And even though the conditions are there in which we should have you could say a revolution, or at least political revolution, is not being met. So actually, maybe us Marxists need to sort of grasp with the idea in which the right wing seems to be doing very well, is that framing everything through culture. I think this is where, when it comes to immigration, they've been less successful saying immigration's taking your jobs, immigration is killing wages. I'm not saying it's unsuccessful. A lot of people buy into that. But now we've seen a shift from the right wing. They're not making the economic argument against immigrants. They're now saying, actually, these people are rapists. These people are dangerous. They're watering down our culture. Very insidious stuff, but it seems to be having a lot more impact.
Yeah, I think what you said that, Marx didn't see Thatcher coming, clearly,
No.
And she said, one of her most famous quotes is, "The economics is the method, but the goal is to change the heart and soul."
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's exactly what she's done, and that's exactly why it's so difficult now to see these material conditions change, because she's already made us all into these little projects. We see ourselves as little businesses or something that we need to always optimize. People wear like Apple watches that tell them what percentage their body is on or their tiredness is on. Like, we have to always be checking emails, and I think that overwhelming self-optimization and like the entrepreneurialism of the self, the entrepreneur is hailed as this like sacred being in neoliberal society, isn't it? Like, we should all become entrepreneurs. If only we knew how to manage our finances properly and all that kind of stuff. Like, that has led to this hugely competitive dog eat dog sort of environment where it is very, very difficult to unify and create an organization and organize to overcome those conditions, because it's become so ingrained within us. And I think that's going to be, when she did indeed say that she changed the heart and soul, that is incredibly difficult to tackle.
We are a nation of petty bourgeois instead of a nation of workers versus the 1%. I mean, a lot of us on the left have tried to counter this narrative by saying, hey, look, don't blame immigrants, don't blame disabled people or the unemployed. It's the elites. And that is the message the left have been pushing for a very long time. A lot of people aren't finding that convincing. And I think fundamentally, especially when it comes to immigration, it's very emotive. So what do you think about that? It's getting some people. I mean, of course, Zach Polanski's Green Party surged to number 2. But I still find, even when I'm having everyday conversations with people, I say, don't blame immigrants, all right? Don't blame people on benefits. It's the elites. Yeah. And they're not convinced. So why do you think they're not becoming convinced with that? And also, what do you think we need to do? What sort of strategy do we need to do to change people's minds? I appreciate it's a very tough question.
Well, I actually wrote my PhD on this, so it's
there you go then.
It's not that the question's tough, is that there is so much to be said
Yeah.
on this. And, you know, my PhD was on nostalgia and politics. And nostalgia is a feeling. Like you said, this is about emotions. When it's about emotions, it's very difficult to just get people to think their way out of a feeling. You know what that's like. If somebody tells you, oh, don't stress, you know, oh, I'm cured. You know, it's very, very difficult to sort of overcome that. And even Freud himself has said, you know, if you confront the emotion with the truth as such, it makes no difference. So you can tell people the truth, but it will make no difference
This is Zach Palan.
don't have if you don't have an emotion to replace that with. So I think, speaking of Zach Polanski, he is a great example of how we can talk about hope. You know, we need to replace that emotion with that emotion, because the emotion here is loss. Okay, loss of stability, loss of security, certainty, community being probably the most important. And if we don't begin to ask questions and think critically about these emotions, then they can be repurposed by people like Nigel Farage. Like I was saying before, you know, aggrievement and wounded egos is really, really dangerous. And the thing is, like, these emotions are completely valid. Like, we should feel angry. We should feel like we've lost them, because we have. Like, neoliberalism has meant we've lost community centres, the stability of the NHS, housing. But we need to make that invisible hand visible to people. You know, we need to tackle the false consciousness of this system. And it does actually mean we have to do it in a compassionate way, I think, which is probably the most difficult bit. I really struggle with my nana when she's telling me all sorts of, you know, blaming the immigrants or whatever. But we need to validate those feelings, because it's not the feeling that is wrong, it's the way that it's being manipulated by people like Farage and Reform. And I think as well, like, we need to start asking very fundamental questions about the future and the present, and really aggressively imagine a better future than the present, because that's really the issue. I think we face such a problem with imagination. You know, I don't know if anybody's seen the film Children of Men. That's exactly what that's about. It's this: the future can't be born. There are no more new ideas. And funnily enough, it becomes this really, like, anti-immigrant, nationalist, like, extremely hostile environment to outsiders, because when you don't have a future to look to, then you will look to the past. And that is the politics of fascism. You know, all politics is geared towards the future. That is the nature of politics. It's all about changing imagining a better future. But when fascism is all about the past, it just becomes about revenge. And that's what's happened when you can't see the future, when the future looks so bleak, like Zach Polanski was saying about, you know, the climate crisis, and Gen Z are now like the most depressed generation to have ever existed. And, you know, the inequality is 1,000 times worse than during, like, the 14th century. Like, there's no question as to why this is the feeling that, you know, the past probably was better. In fact, under Keynesian economics, you would argue that it was. But we aggressively need to imagine a better future and ask really basic questions about what we want, because revenge gets you nowhere. You know, it's a feeling, and it might be comforting, but ultimately it's an end in itself. It will lead nowhere. And if we look to the last round of the 1930s fascism, well, we know where it leads, and it's just destruction, self-destruction, and appeal to ego. So yeah, I think the solution is really holding on to hope, holding on to compassion. And again, one of my favorite theorists, Hannah Arendt, she talks about this idea. It's called amor mundi, and it means loving the world in Latin or something. And it's this idea that you love the world enough to want to change it. And I think that is, we really need to hold on to that spirit. And she wrote that in this book, which I really recommend to everyone in this climate. Is called Men in Dark Times. I feel like we can all, resonate. But yeah, I think we really need to hold on to our humanity here and what we want for our children, what we want as a, as a collective, because that, I think, truly is what has been lost.